Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Your Legislators, a production of KRWG Broadcasting. Your Legislators is a public service production providing our viewing and listening audiences in southern New Mexico the opportunity to hear about important legislative issues directly from their elected representatives in Santa Fe. Now here is your host, Fred Martino.
Thanks so much for joining us for Your Legislators this week. I'm very pleased to have with us for the half hour today Senator Howie Morales. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me be a part of this.
It's good to have you with us. And we're starting this morning with an issue that is extremely important to New Mexicans and certainly a big part of what goes on during every legislative session, and that is coming up with the next fiscal year's budget. The House has approved a plan and sent it to the Senate. I'd like to get your feedback on that and the priorities you'd like to see in New Mexico's next budget.
Yeah, that's correct. Currently, we do have the budget over at the Senate. It did come over a little later than we would have liked. I know they had some issues and negotiations that had to take place on the House side, but nonetheless, we have it here, and that's the primary objective of a 30-day session is to make sure that we do have a budget for the following fiscal year. And so our Senate Finance Committee will be busy going through and ensuring that we see the budget, that we're placing appropriate items where they need to be, but at the same time, we need to ensure that we are fiscally conservative as well, and to ensure that as we turn the corner, that we're doing it responsibly.
Now, I know the House plan has restored more than $200 million in spending based on projections that New Mexico is going to have more revenue to be able to pay that bill. When you look at that philosophy, I'd like to get your thoughts on it. Also, any particular areas where you would like to see increased or restored spending?
Well, I think that's the key point with this legislative session. When I came in 2008, we had a little bit of a surplus. The last few years after that, we really have had to make difficult choices, making cuts in areas that we really didn't want to, but we had to have a balanced budget. As we come in now, there's been discussion that we have about a $255 million surplus. That kind of that's up for negotiation too, simply because the price of natural gas is not at the level we'd like it to be, but nonetheless, we do have some revenue that we can work with. We can talk about maybe $200 million, and that's definitely a positive for the state of New Mexico. With those tough decisions we had to make before, now's the time that we go through, and I really feel that it's not the time to go and start new programs or the time to go and have new projects out there. We really need to start restoring and getting the level of cuts where they were to try to do it as much as possible with the surplus that we do have.
Okay. As you know, Senator, one of the big areas where constituents are looking for action involves job creation. We have seen some very encouraging news in the last couple of months with some job creation in New Mexico and nationally now. There has been talk about some legislation in this session to address job creation. Any areas where you think the legislature can make some real headway here?
Well, I think that's part of the discussion right now. Is there's some proposals that would give tax cuts to industry or business that could come in and see if they would be willing to start up here. And so that needs to be part of the discussion. But what also needs to be part of the discussion is that we have businesses who have endured the storm, businesses who are New Mexico homegrown, and we've got to do what we can to ensure that we're helping them out, because through the good and bad times, they're going to stay here. And so I want to be real cautious before we go out and we start making deals and giving huge tax cuts. We want to make sure and stabilize our businesses that have been here to be able to ensure that they can have job growth that's going to remain throughout the years. As far as industry that we've talked about, obviously there's a lot of opportunity that we can continue to discuss. I'm confident that New Mexico is going to be a key player in that, as I really feel that as a state we can really entice these corporations or these industries or these small businesses to remain open here. So we're hopeful with that. We don't have as much money as we'd like to work with, but at the same time I think that we do have incentives that can really help them out.
Senator, as you know, one area where job creation is involved that has created some controversy involves a Spaceport America and a bill to protect companies from liability at the spaceport failed. Your thoughts on that?
You know, I think that might be brought up for reconsideration. I'm not sure. That was on the House side, so we really haven't heard too much of the debate on that. I don't really know the impact of that. I think that as we get more discussion and more information, we'll have more developments on what we can do on the Senate side.
So it sounds like you support this measure, the idea to absolve companies of liability in order to attract more companies, or no?
You know, I haven't seen the legislation that hasn't come over to us at this point, so it's very hard to give an answer on that without knowing the details of that piece of legislation.
Okay, well, one area where I know you have great expertise and you have talked about involves education reform, and there have been a number of measures that have been out there dealing with education reform. I'm going to just open that up to you and let you talk about the ones that you think need some clarification and your position on some of these education reform bills.
Thank you, and that's a huge part of this session as well, is when we're talking about education. Definitely we want to have continual improvement with our educational system, but when we're having discussions with education, it's important that we put the facts out there and that we start from that type of level playing field. We often hear that we're 48th, 49th, or 50th in the nation, and that's kind of a crisis argument that there has to be something done. Whatever that may be, we hear the discussions that something has to get done. You know, I understand that we do have to make improvements, but with the facts out there, in January of 2011, New Mexico was ranked 32nd of all the nations, of all the states within the nation. January of 2012, the results came out again with the report card, and New Mexico moved up to 30th. We're not satisfied, we're not complacent, and we don't feel that we want to, you know, stay at that level, but that is showing that where we used to be in the 40th, even close to last, we have made improvements. There's been changes that have taken place, and credit really needs to go to our educators who day in and day out do what they can to assist our students. So with that in mind, as we continually have made improvements, we'll look and we'll start the discussions that what can we do to take us from 30th, where we're currently at, to move us into the top 15, move us into the top 10, and eventually my goal is that we be #1 when it's competing with any state. But when we're talking about reform, there's two pieces of legislation that's out here that we're discussing. One is whether we hold back third graders who aren't able to read proficiently. Another one is in our discussion with how do we evaluate effectively our educators, whether they're teachers or principals. And those have created a lot of controversy there, but a lot of good discussion has come from it as well. I'm carrying a piece of legislation that deals with the teacher effectiveness. And this is important because a lot of times the real education reform that's out there, the politically popular thing is to tie effectiveness and tie evaluation to what's happening on the standardized base assessment. And that's a concern because you go through and numbers can be very deceiving. It's very easy to say, okay, this teacher is being successful if their student scores are raising, but we have to realize that we're only measuring reading and math. There's many more subjects that are out there. There's many more areas that complete the educational process, and because of that, we've got to have a system in place that measures every single one of those areas, whether it's art, drama, mathematics, science, history. We've got to have a system in place that goes through and just doesn't rely on the standardized base assessment.
And Senator, if you can, for our viewers that are not familiar with your background in education, give them that information.
Yeah, and you know, I came through the public schools in New Mexico, educated and very proud of the education that I had. I was proud of the educators that were there who cared, who really went above and beyond, and who were effective. And so I'm proud to be a graduate of New Mexico high schools. Went on and got my bachelor's and master's from Western New Mexico University, and my PhD in curriculum and instruction from New Mexico State University. So I am very, very proud of the system that we have in place, recognizing that it's not perfect and it may not be where we want to be, but at the same time, we sure aren't as bad as some people are making it out to be as well.
Well, and I wanted to establish the fact that you have a doctorate in education, and getting to that point that, you know, starting this discussion with the facts is so critical. It's something that we've done here at the station a number of times, and one of the pieces that's often missed when you talk about education reform, the discussion only is about teachers and schools. It's not about parents and socioeconomics, and this is a very important thing that when you look at results on standardized testing, there is a clear connection to socioeconomics, and it's something that if we don't talk about, there's no impetus for public policy to address those issues.
You're exactly right, and that's what's happened in other states. We see in Florida and Tennessee and Georgia and Alabama, states who have really rushed in to be recipients of maybe Race to the Top funding, or when No Child Left Behind came in. There was a lot of changes that were made that would tie evaluation, tie school productivity to the standardized-based assessment. And we've seen the troubles that they've had. And you're exactly right. When we're talking about the facts, that's what research is about, and that's what education is about, is knowing that what it is that you're talking about has the justification behind it. And that's what I try to make the argument up here. And I think that, you know, last year was a difficult session. We had passed an A through F system in place, and we're grading schools. The talk about it was that it was going to be easier for parents to understand what it is their schools were doing. What wasn't evaluated was how that was going to be developed, what the formula was going to be used, and the mathematical components in there. And really, if you ask school districts how can they improve, they cannot answer that because they do not understand the formula. I've asked PED to please explain the formula to make it more easier understood. They have trouble doing that. So that goes through and shows that it's not as simple as it was portrayed. And when we're talking about the facts, it's important that we do point out that there's some value-added models that are in place. And again, these are statistical, mathematical formulas that really have some trouble, and they really have some issues where they show so much unreliability and so much instability when it comes to the results that they give. My thought is that we got to be very precise in what we do. We've got to ensure that we are well balanced, because we don't want students who are just going to come out and focus on two areas and be really good at preparation for tests. We want students who can critically think and to actually demonstrate rather than what's just done on the paper and pencil portion of it.
Okay, very important issue, and appreciate you taking the time to address that today on the program. Another issue that has taken up a lot of time during the legislative session is once again the driver's license issue for undocumented individuals. House has passed a repeal. Now it's on to the Senate. Your thoughts on this?
You know, it's amazing how much energy and time is placed on this. When you look at the headlines of the newspapers or the stories in the television, it's always the first story that's going to be discussed. And in the Finance Committee, we really don't hear much of that. We will as it comes through. But I think what needs to be pointed out is when it was brought out last year, the idea was let's eliminate all 80 or 90,000 individuals who have a license who were considered to be part of this foreign national database. Well, there was not a foreign national database. What they were going off of was individuals who didn't have a Social Security number. People before weren't required to put a Social Security number, and what they found was that there was actually people born in this country, people who are legal residents, people who have their proper documentation who were part of that. And because of that, then they saw they can't just go through and eliminate that. So obviously they went through and brought a different proposal. Now the proposal is let's go through and eliminate, basically grandfather those individuals who have those 88 or 90,000 license at this point. Let's grandfather them in, but that goes right against the discussion of the fraud and abuse. I understand. I think that's a valid point. There has been fraud and there has been abuse. People have come into the state and they've gotten their license and left. The plan that we have in place on the Senate was the same plan we had last year. It could have been taken care of last year because it addresses the heart of the issue, and that's the fraud and abuse. Basically what it would do is have individuals have to come in more frequently. Every 2 years they'd have to come in. ensure that we have a fingerprinting system in place. And this is important because the most widely used database in this country is the Motor Vehicles Department. And by doing that, we ensure that if there's an individual who's out there committing criminal acts, that we do have a database that's there. It doesn't allow people to be grandfathered in and to go off with their license that they have. What it does is it ensures that if they're truly from this state, that they're truly here, then they're going to come in and they're going to show and have that accountability rather than letting someone just go free. And you know, I understand with the issues that we're talking about, I agree. The fraud and abuse are there. The best way to approach that is to go through with the Senate compromise that was in place since a year ago.
Is that likely?
I know on the Senate side, you know, I feel very confident because again, you're dealing with the facts and you're dealing with the issues that we have in front of us. I really feel that the Senate will hold to that because it does deal with the heart of the issue. Whether that'll be signed or not, that's up to the governor.
Okay, very interesting and continuing issue. As you know, there are proposals to reform the pension system for municipal and for education employees. Where do you stand on that?
You know, just yesterday in Senate Finance, we heard the education side, the ERB portion of it, and without a doubt, there's got to be change. Some individuals will email saying, please don't change anything, leave it the way it is. That's not doable. There's going to have to be some changes. Now, the key is how we're going to be able to have the softest landing for the individuals who are already near retirement or those individuals who were promised something when they came in to have those retirement benefits when they're done. And that's what we've been working through. It is going to require increased contributions. The question is, do we have the state, the taxpayers across the state pay for all those, or do we have the individuals who are in the system increase their portion? So I do feel that we have a good plan in place. I think that it doesn't make everybody happy, but at the same time, as we have solvency that will take care of this issue. I really think that if we can go through what was passed through the Senate Finance Committee yesterday, that it probably is the best deal that anybody in the country could take when you're dealing with the issues of solvency that we have been dealing with.
Well, let me get an understanding of what that deal was. The key
basically
elements.
Yes, basically what it was is the retirement age basically was mandated, and I believe is at 55, but it does have an increased contribution. I think it's a 1.4% increased contribution from those individuals that are receiving the benefits. Obviously, you know, I would rather not have those individuals do that, but at the same time, I would rather have that in place than to have to increase their retirement, or, you know, if some are expecting to retire, let's say in 5 years, that is able to be honored. The area where there's really going to be a lot of changes is those individuals that are coming in the system. Those new employees that are going to be just beginning, they will have different standards that they'll have to go by, but they know that coming in, and that's right from the beginning. These other individuals, whether they're the teachers or public workers, they came in, they signed on with a different agreement, and we need to do as best we can to honor that with in mind that in order to be solvent, the contributions are going to have to go up a little bit.
Well, as you know, the ERB had come up with a plan to restrict cost of living adjustments. Was that part of this compromise in the Senate, or was that dropped in favor of the increased contributions?
Yes, and you know, when you talk about the cost of living adjustment, that did cause a lot of controversy as well. Going through and freezing it may be the most responsible thing we can do financially, but again, I think that would be very detrimental, and so that's not part of the agreement that we had yesterday.
Okay, now that's the ERB. What about the PERA?
The PERA side, we're going to have to look at that as well and see what it is that we can do, because again, the key is to have solvency, to ensure that we don't lose this fund and to ensure that, that our employees are getting the benefits that they expected. But that's going to be another discussion as we go through and hear more of the debate with that portion of it.
Do you think there's enough time to get this legislation through?
I think it's extremely important that it does get through. The longer we put it off, the more detrimental and the harder landing that's going to take place for individuals who are actually vested in the programs. I do think this is a priority bill that will get through the session. We'll see if it does get signed. My hope's that it is going to get signed, and at the same time, it has a balance not to go through and really detrimentally affect our employees. On the other side, though, is I do have a piece of legislation out there. Last year, we were successful in the cuts that went to our public employees were at 3.25%. We have a plan in place that we will eliminate 1.75 of that, and I currently have a bill that would take away a 1.5% cut that was in place there too. I really think that this would be a responsible thing to do, because this, again, would further assist, and all we're doing is giving back to the state employees what was at one point was theirs.
Okay. Very controversial issues. Another one that has created some controversy last session, a bill to allow the state and local governments to ban all fireworks during extreme drought failed. This surprised a lot of people since we had the worst wildfire season ever. It was a devastating time. I understand, once again, there's been difficulty getting legislation through on this. What are your thoughts on this?
You're right, you know, and one of the first fires that did take place last year during the horrendous fire season we had was the Quail Ridge fire in Silver City. We saw the impact and the devastation of it. As the legislation has come through and we've seen that there was many more fires, those conscious fires, other fires that took place, it really had a detrimental impact on our state and our state resources as well. So the proposal was to go through and to ban fireworks, and when you're in the discussion, I didn't get a chance to hear the bill because I was in Finance Committee. I believe it went to corporations, and a lot of the debate from what I hear was about, you know, do fireworks really start the fires? You know, have they been directly linked to being the cause? What about cigarettes? What about matches? And so those are part of the discussions right there, along with that we'd be hurting small businesses who actually, it seems to be a big industry within the state in the fireworks portion of it. So those are some of the debates that took place there. You know, I'm very cautious on the fire side, and it does concern me a great deal, because whether it could be linked that fireworks are a cause or not of fires, I think that the potential is there. And when you have the potential in really high seasons, as we're going to have going in again this year, that there's that potential that's there. And if we could have done anything to mitigate that potential, I think it would have been a benefit for the state. But it didn't make it out of committee. I'm not exactly sure what the full rationale was, but you know, I would have rather have given our local governments the opportunity to make that decision for themselves.
Okay, I guess, again, something for another session. Some local funding priorities include money for a new 911 center in Las Cruces and a crisis triage center for those with psychiatric problems in Doña Ana County. Where does this stand?
I believe that we're going to hear the triage bill that's going to take place, and what it would do is provide funding to assist our individuals who are patients needing psychiatric assistance. I believe we hear that in finance. I think it's a little bit late in the game to get that through, but we'll see how that goes. I think that would be a big benefit for our individuals in the southern part of the state, and we're hoping that that does make it through. It is a benefit.
Okay. Another funding issue that gets back to one of your favorite issues, education. As you know, there is an early college high school at New Mexico State University, and this allows students to get a college degree while they're in high school. Now, one other local funding priority is for some money for the so-called dual credit programs like these at the early college high school at NMSU. Your thoughts on that?
I'm carrying a similar piece of legislation for the Grant County area that would really look and focus on getting these students the technical trade skills that they may need while they're in high school. We have to understand that the common thought was before is let's go through and let's get everybody a college degree, let's have them go on and get a job in the professional sector. But what was not realized is that there's a professional sector that also necessarily doesn't have to go through the four-year institution, and it's the technical side. And I think that that's important because we have plumbers, we have carpenters, we have people from skilled labor that are really going to, we're going to see a shortage there because of the retirement that's going to take place. The need is there. I think that this is a great opportunity to meet in the middle. For those students, when we're talking about standardized tests, that may not work for them. But given an opportunity to do something with their hands, to get those skills in place, I think that would be a great advantage to our state, and it would really help in our dropout rate. I think that this would be one that we really need to focus on. We provide a need for the communities, we provide a need in the education system, and we're training our students to be productive members of our society. So I think this is great. When we're talking about dual credit, it's important that we do keep that in balance too. Because when we're discussing that, we want them as much as possible to have relevance to their life occupation. We can do this, but I believe it needs to be more so at the junior and senior level. I think that they need to take the classes that can be offered at the high school level, whether it's freshman and sophomore classes. Maybe it's a beginning math, or maybe it's a keyboarding class, or maybe it's different classes like that that can be offered at the high school level. Those younger students need to be taking it there, and then the more advanced skill level classes can take it probably at the junior and senior level, up at the university level, or in the high school setting that provides dual credit. This is key because right now as a state, we can fund the high school for those classes and at the same time fund the university for those exact same classes. We don't have the funding to do both. Here's an opportunity to really meet the need at the lower high school levels, freshman and sophomore, and really meet the need for the skilled labor at the junior and senior level and allow them to get dual credit. I think this is a big plus for our state.
Okay, very important stuff, and we covered an awful lot today thanks to your help, State Senator Howie Morales. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for your time as well.
All right, and thank you at home for joining us. We'll see you again next week.
Your Legislators is a production of KRWG Broadcasting. Copyright New Mexico State University Board of Regents.